In January of 2000, 19-year-old Dusti Duke, an alleged abuse survivor of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, was found dead with a single gunshot wound to the head. Police found the gun. The medical examiner found a suicide note, but there were 2 shell casings on the scene. 1 bullet, 2 casings. I have the actual police report and part of the medical examiner's file, and most of what I found points towards suicide. But there's a few other details that I just can't quite explain. Before I show you any documents, let me clearly recap what Dan Ferree has said. Dan is publicly alleged 4 things. 1 is that Dusti was abused sexually by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-90s in New York City. 2, he's alleging that Donald Trump got into his town car where he was working as a driver and basically made references to Dusti while on the phone with Jeffrey Epstein.
And you bragged while you were on your cell phone to somebody named Jeffrey about having raped my daughter by choice.
3, that she was murdered by a gunshot wound to the head. And number 4, that Donald Trump had somehow orchestrated her death.
You know everything I just said is absolutely true, Donald. You know it. Because you did it. Having her murdered on January 10th of 2000, 2 weeks after she called the police about you.
I think at this point, it's important for me to say that I have been trying to get in touch with Dan Ferree.
You're going down, Mr. Donald Man.
I've messaged him on Facebook, I've left YouTube comments, and honestly, at one point, he replied to one of my YouTube comments and said, "How do I get in touch with you?" I left comment replies with my information, which YouTube promptly deleted. I messaged him on Facebook, I friend requested him on Facebook. Eventually, I was able to leave a comment where I just gave him my full name and directed him to my Facebook account, but I still haven't heard anything from him. And at this point, I think if he wanted to talk to me, he would. Okay, so let's talk about what I actually have and look at the documents. I submitted an open records request to Creek County, Oklahoma, and I got back the actual police report from the investigation into Dusti's death. I also received a portion of the Oklahoma medical examiner's file. And that's where I have to be straight with you. I didn't get the full autopsy. In fact, there wasn't a full autopsy. So when we talk about the medical evidence, we only have a partial picture because there wasn't a full autopsy performed. If you guys want to see everything I got from the police, I put a link in the description below. I don't know how long it'll be active. I'll try to leave it up as long as possible. But I'd like to get this info out there for everybody who wants to take a closer look. So here we have the incident report. Basically, it says that Dusti was found in the middle of the roadway. And here we have a statement from Deputy Shane Pitzer. At approximately 14:30 hours, this deputy was dispatched to 13608 South 49th Avenue to investigate a death. Deputy O'Mara and I arrived at the above location and found Dusti Ray Duke dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. The weapon, a Brico 9mm handgun, was found between the victim's legs. A 9mm casing was recovered approximately 2.5 feet to the right of the victim, and a suicide note was recovered from the victim by the medical examiner. The victim's aunt, Luella Duke, made this statement: "It was only a matter of time. She threatened this several times before." So that's a really interesting statement. I mean, we basically have a family member saying, you know, she's threatened to commit suicide before. Here we go. And then we have another statement from Barry Stone. And he says, "I, Barry Stone, Johnny Duke, and Tony Stone came home from Bartlett Collins Hospital Tony has a spider bite. We come in around 2 and decide to go junkin scrap metal and found Dusty laying in the middle of the road. And Barry has signed his statement as well. I mean, that's a very simple statement. And then we have Tony Stone. I went to hospital and went around the land for junk and found her in the road. Tony Stone. So, not not the most articulate of statements here. And we scroll down a little further, and we got a statement from John Duke. Let's see. On Friday is the last time I seen my granddaughter, Dusti Duke. Today, me and Tony Stone, Barry Stone, were driving down to the dump around 2 p.m., and that's when I seen her in the road. Tony went to call the police. And John Stone signed his name to that statement as well. Okay, and now we have the actual Creek County Sheriff report. At about 14:30, it looks like, hours, I was with Deputy Pitzer as he was dispatched to a possible DOA. Upon arrival at the scene, we were met by police officers, Sepulpa police officers maybe, whom had already established a crime scene. At this point, we relieved Clark and Coffee and took control of the crime scene. In the middle of what appeared to be an oil lease road was the body of a white female. The victim's head pointed north, and there was a large amount of blood underneath her head pooling to the west. The victim's legs were crossed at the ankles. The victim was wearing brown hiker boots, blue jeans, a green military-type coat, and a pink sweatshirt. A string from the coat was pulled with tension, and the end of the string was caught in her shoes. That was a really odd detail to me because I don't know, like, if you shoot yourself in the head, how is it that you get the string from your jacket or your sweatshirt caught in your shoelaces? I don't know. Like, that to me was just such an odd thing. So if anybody has any ideas how that would happen, please drop it in the comments. That detail to me stood out as one of the things that I thought was strange about the crime scene. A gun was visible between the victim's knees underneath her. The victim was laying flat on her back and her face was facing the east. Both victims' hands were above her, resting just below her chest. I don't know if that makes sense. Her hands were above. Oh, they were just above her body that was on the ground. Okay. So, and they were probably like here-ish. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The victim had blood around her nose and mouth and also around the thumb index web of her right hand. One of the other things that I thought was a little bit interesting was that her ankles were crossed. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you shot yourself, depending on how you were positioned before you shot yourself, your ankles could end up crossed. I don't know. I thought it was weird, but I don't think that's enough to say, like, there was something strange going on. I almost find the string and the jacket being pulled down into her tennis shoes, that seems more odd to me. A 9mm shell casing was found just to the east of the victim, within 2 to 3 feet and immediately east of the victim's feet. The victim had a small hole which appeared to be an exit wound on the victim's left side of the head. So we have an exit wound here, and we have an entry wound here. The victim had no other visible signs of injury. At this point, Chief Deputy Ed Willingham was called to the scene and arrived soon thereafter. In the interim, EMS personnel had arrived on the scene and advised that since the victim was obviously deceased, they would not interfere with the crime scene. Upon the arrival of Willingham, the office of the chief medical examiner was contacted and arrived with Robert's funeral home. The victim was then removed from the scene. During the victim's removal, I observed a second shell casing laying just north and west of where the victim had been discovered. So this is really interesting to me. There's 2 shell casings. Normally you have 2 shell casings when 2 shots have been fired. I think it's unusual, not impossible. And I think it's been documented before of people shooting themselves twice in the head. Is that what happened? I don't know. I mean, I doubt it. I don't think so. Yeah, it's just such an odd thing. Now, I did look up these Bryco 9mm handguns, and apparently they do jam. They were like a very cheap kind of like Saturday night special kind of weapon. And I think you could get them for like $80 back during this time, or when they were made, so it's a fairly cheap, I mean, not the most expensive, it's probably one of the cheapest handguns you could probably buy back then, but yeah, it's definitely on the cheaper end of guns. So I could see a situation in which the gun would jam and then she would need to eject the casing. I don't know. I mean, you would have tried to, maybe she fired a test shot, right before she did it. I think that's totally plausible. You're a young girl who's about to kill yourself. Like, you might want to know that the gun is actually working before you put it to your head. I don't know. I think that's a possibility too. So during the victim's removal, I observed a second shell casing laying just north and west of where the victim had been discovered. The shell casing was within feet of the victim. I advised Willingham, who collected the shell casing. I'm pretty sure. Yep. So that's it. That's it for the police report. That was the entirety of the police report. It doesn't look like there was really an investigation outside of that into, was it a possible murder? I think they just concluded basically right on scene that, yeah, this is a suicide. And based on the statements from the family and people that knew her, they seemed fine with that assessment. So now we get to the medical examiner report. 1 1/4 inch oval gunshot wound entrance to the right temple and a 3/4 inch exit left temple. So, I mean, that seems pretty consistent with a suicide to me. We have the manner of death listed as suicide. No autopsy was performed, and the medical examiner believes that the gunshot wound to the head is what killed her, which seems pretty obvious. Okay, and then here we have a diagram of Dusty's body from the front. Basically, we have the entry and exit wounds on the temple of the head. Down here by her arm, she has a yellow / green contusion, which is basically a bruise. She's got a belly button ring. She's got a tattoo. She's got a little green contusion and a small abrasion or contusion on the knee. That nothing about that really seems that crazy. I see girls all the time with like little bruises here and there. And she also had a toe ring. I mean, that seems not particularly important, but I figured I'd mention it. And then we have the diagram of the gunshot wound entrance, 1 1/4 inch. And then we have the 3/4 inch gunshot wound exit. And this is all signed by the medical examiner. As far as evidence for, Dan Ferree's theory that Dusty was murdered, the only things that really stick out to me are maybe the position of her ankles being crossed. But that alone, I don't think is enough. I do find it odd that the jacket or the string from her jacket or sweatshirt was pulled down into her shoelaces and was stuck there. That to me was pretty interesting. I can't think of why, if you shot yourself in the head from a standing or even a sitting position, like how your jacket string would get caught up in your shoelaces. I mean, that part really, it almost bothers me more than the 2 shell casings. And I don't think it should, but it does. The 2 shell casings are interesting because it is possible that she tested, the gun before she shot it. Maybe she hadn't shot it in a long time and wanted to make sure that it was going to work. So maybe she fired a shot, and once she realized this is going to work, maybe she turned the gun on herself. I think that's a possibility. Maybe there was maybe a shot had been fired there before by somebody else, completely unrelated to her suicide, and maybe there was just a spent shell casing on the ground. Or, I don't know. I was going to say maybe the gun was maybe she had pulled the gun from a bag. They didn't say they found a bag or any sort of like storage container, but maybe a shell casing had fell out, right? I mean, I suppose that's possible. At this point, I think I lean towards suicide, to be honest. Unless Dan wants to go on record with me and tell me more about why he thinks that Dusti was murdered. I don't know how much further I could really go down this rabbit hole. And that doesn't mean that Dusti wasn't necessarily abused by Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump. I think it's certainly possible. But was she then murdered because she went to the police? And which I don't have a police report regarding her having gone to the police. I don't know if she did or not. I know I did contact the Tulsa police, and I asked for everything that they had regarding Dusti Duke from, like a pretty good chunk of time, like a couple months before her death and a couple months after. And they never actually responded to me. So I only ever got a response from Creek County. So yeah, I don't know if Dusti really did go to the police or not. But, like I said, if Dan ever wants to come on and talk to me, I would love to get his take on things and maybe understand where he's coming from a little bit better. But unless he wants to do that, unless he's willing to do that, I don't know how much more I can really go down this rabbit hole, guys. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Please leave me a message, drop a comment, and if you like this video, if you like this kind of format, please like, subscribe. I've got a lot more videos coming out soon, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. So, later.